In March 1982, Frank Sinatra stopped mid-performance at the legendary hall, abandoning New York, New York as 2,000 people sat in stunned silence, watching the chairman of the board completely break character for the first time in his legendary career. What happened next would transform not just that evening, but how everyone in that room understood what it truly means to be human. But what could possibly make the most confident performer in history risk everything by dedicating his final song to a complete stranger, a struggling factory worker he'd never even met? The burgundy velvet curtains of the legendary hall hang heavy in the March evening air, their rich fabric catching the amber glow of the house lights as 2,000 patrons settle into their seats. The year is 1982, and Manhattan pulses with the electric energy of a city that never sleeps. But an unusual energy permeates tonight, charged with an anticipation that seems to vibrate through the very walls of this legendary venue. In the orchestra section, faces illuminated by the soft pre-show lighting reveal a mixture of longtime devotees and curious newcomers, all united by the magnetic pull of witnessing Frank Sinatra live. Women clutch programs against their chests like sacred texts, while men adjust their ties with the nervous energy of supplicants preparing for communion. The venue itself breathes with history. These are the same walls that have witnessed Tchaikovsky conduct his own compositions, the same stage where Billie Holiday poured her heart into Strange Fruit, the same acoustics that carried Judy Garland's triumphant comeback to every corner of the hall. Tonight, the ghosts of these legendary performances seem to hover in the shadows, waiting to welcome another chapter into the hall's immortal story. The ornate ceiling, with its intricate moldings and crystal chandeliers, reflects the warm glow of anticipation rising from the packed house below. Backstage, the familiar ritual unfolds with practiced precision, yet carries an undercurrent of something unprecedented. The legend adjusts his black bow tie in the mirror, his fingers working with the muscle memory of decades. But tonight, those same fingers seem to linger longer than usual, as if he's studying his own reflection for clues to a mystery he can't quite name. At 66, his face carries the weight of a life lived fully, every triumph and heartbreak etched into the lines around his piercing blue eyes. The dressing room smells of cigarettes and cologne, a scent that has followed him from the Paramount Theater to the Copa to Vegas, and now here to this temple of American music. His longtime pianist Bill Miller runs through scales in the distance, the notes floating through the corridors like ghosts of performances past. But even Bill's usually steady rhythm seems touched by tonight's strange energy. The usual pre-show chatter among the musicians carries a different tone, more reverent, more aware that they are about to participate in something that transcends mere entertainment. Crew members who have worked hundreds of Sinatra shows move through their preparations with an almost ceremonial precision, as if some collective unconscious has informed them that this evening demands their absolute best. The energy in the hall shifts as the house lights begin their slow fade. Conversations die to whispers, then to silence that feels almost religious in its intensity. The darkness feels sacred, pregnant with possibility, and weighted with expectation. From the wings, Frank can see the expectant faces stretching back into the far reaches of the venue, can feel their collective breath held in anticipation. This is the legendary hall, not just another stop on the tour, but the venue where legends are not just born, but consecrated. Tonight, something feels ceremonial about his presence here, as if destiny itself has orchestrated this convergence of artist, audience, and sacred space. The orchestra begins the opening notes of "I've Got You Under My Skin," and Frank Sinatra steps into immortality. The first set unfolds like pages from an autobiography written in melody and rhythm. Frank moves through "Fly Me to the Moon" and "The Way You Look Tonight" with the effortless grace of a master craftsman. But those who know him best, the musicians, the longtime crew members watching from the wings, notice the subtle changes. The pauses between songs stretch slightly longer than usual. His grip on the microphone stand appears more deliberate, more necessary. During Strangers in the Night, he closes his eyes for an extended moment, as if drawing strength from some internal reservoir that feels less bottomless than it once did. Intermission arrives with thunderous applause, but backstage, the atmosphere shifts to something more intimate and vulnerable. Frank retreats to his dressing room, loosening his bow tie as he settles into the worn leather chair that has followed him to venues across the globe. The walls are lined with flowers from well-wishers, telegrams from fellow performers, and the usual trappings of celebrity adoration. But tucked among these tokens of fame sits a simple envelope, its edges worn from handling, addressed in careful handwriting to Mr. Sinatra with no return address. Inside, written on plain notebook paper, are the words of Tony Castellano from Pittsburgh. The letter speaks of layoffs at the steel plant, of a family struggling to make ends meet, of nights when sleep won't come because the bills keep mounting. But it also speaks of music, specifically the crooner's music, playing on an old radio in a small kitchen, providing hope when hope seems impossible to find. Your voice reminds me that I'm not alone in this fight, the letter reads. When you sing about getting back up after life knocks you down, I believe it because you sound like you've been there too. Old Blue Eyes has received thousands of such letters over the years, but this one cuts deeper. Perhaps it's the timing, coming at a moment when his own mortality feels more present than ever. Perhaps it's the honesty in Tony's words, the absence of starstruck flattery replaced by a raw human connection. Or perhaps it's the weight of his own recent struggles, the failed marriages, the estrangement from some of his children, the growing awareness that the spotlight that has defined his existence for 40 years won't burn forever. He thinks of his father, Marty, who worked the docks in Hoboken, whose hands were permanently stained with the honest dirt of labor. He remembers his mother Dolly's fierce determination to lift her family out of poverty, her unwavering belief that her Frankie was destined for something greater. Success has distanced him from those roots, surrounded him with luxury and privilege that his younger self could never have imagined. But Tony's letter bridges that distance, reminds him of the working-class heart that still beats beneath the custom-tailored tuxedo. As the intermission draws to a close, Frank carefully folds the letter and places it in his jacket pocket, close to his heart. The second set awaits, but something has shifted. The performer who will return to that stage carries not just the expectations of the audience, but the weight of connection to a struggling steel plant worker. What Frank doesn't know is that Tony Castellano, using his last unemployment check, has made the journey from Pittsburgh to New York tonight, sitting in the far back of the hall, hoping to catch a glimpse of the man whose music has kept him going. But beneath the polished performance, deeper currents are stirring. As the evening progresses, the second set begins with "Come Fly With Me," and Frank's voice soars through the opening verses with renewed power, as if intermission has restored something essential within him. The audience responds with the enthusiasm of devotees witnessing their high priest perform sacred rituals. But Frank's attention seems divided, his eyes occasionally drifting to scan the crowd as if searching for someone specific. In the back of the hall, Tony Castellano sits quietly, wearing his best shirt and the work cap he's owned for 15 years, clutching a program he can barely afford. The orchestra, led by Bill Miller's masterful piano work, provides the familiar cushion of sound that has supported countless Sinatra performances. But tonight, even the musicians sense something different in their leader's demeanor. "The Lady is a Tramp" follows. Then, "I Get a Kick Out of You," each song delivered with technical precision, but carrying an emotional undertone that wasn't present in the first set. Frank's movements across the stage appear more deliberate, less theatrical, as if he's conserving energy for something important yet to come. The spotlight catches beads of perspiration on his forehead, despite the cool March evening, and his left hand occasionally brushes against his jacket pocket where Tony's letter rests against his heart. Then comes "New York, New York," the song that has become his unofficial anthem, the tune that transforms every audience into a congregation of true believers. The opening notes ring out with their familiar grandeur, and Frank launches into the verses with the confidence of a man who has sung these words thousands of times. "Start spreading the news. I'm leaving today," he croons, but something in his voice carries a weight that wasn't there in previous performances. The audience doesn't notice, caught up in the infectious energy of their unofficial city anthem. But halfway through the second verse, something unprecedented happens. Frank stops singing mid-phrase, his voice cutting off abruptly on "these vagabond shoes." The orchestra continues for several measures, Bill Miller's piano carrying the melody while the brass section maintains the triumphant arrangement. But gradually the musicians realize their leader is no longer with them. One by one, the instruments fall silent until only the echo of the last trumpet note hangs in the air. Every soul in attendance sits in stunned silence. The legend, the consummate professional who has never missed a cue, never broken character, never shown weakness on stage, stands motionless at center stage, his eyes closed, his right hand gripping the microphone stand as if it's the only thing keeping him upright. The hush stretches beyond comfort into something approaching terror. Audience members exchange worried glances, wondering if they're witnessing a medical emergency, a nervous breakdown, or something else entirely. For 30 seconds that feel like 30 minutes, the venue exists in suspended animation. The great entertainer appears to be wrestling with invisible demons, his face a canvas of conflicting emotions. His breathing is visible, deliberate, as if he's drawing strength from some deep well of experience and pain. Tony's words in his pocket seem to pulse with significance, their simple message echoing in his mind. Your voice reminds me that I'm not alone in this fight. When Frank finally opens his eyes, they're different, softer somehow, more human. The imperious confidence of chairman of the board has been replaced by something more vulnerable and infinitely more powerful. He releases his death grip on the microphone stand and takes a step closer to the edge of the stage, abandoning the safe distance that separates performer from audience. The stillness continues, but now it feels expectant rather than worried. As if everyone in the hall senses they're about to witness something unprecedented in the carefully choreographed world of Frank Sinatra. His voice, when it finally cuts through the cathedral silence of the venue, is barely above a whisper, yet it carries to the furthest reaches of the hall with crystalline clarity. You know what? He says, and the informality of it, the complete abandonment of his usual stage patter, sends a ripple of surprise through the audience. He's no longer performing, he's simply talking, human to human, across the void that typically separates entertainer from entertained. Then, as if guided by instinct, his eyes find a man in the back row wearing a work cap, tears streaming down his weathered face, a face that somehow embodies every working man Frank has ever known. Is there a Tony here tonight? Frank calls out softly. Tony Castellano from Pittsburgh? The man slowly stands, his voice barely audible as he calls back. That's me, Mr. Sinatra. Frank gestures for him to come forward. I've been doing this for 40 years, he continues, his voice gaining strength with each word. 40 years of lights and applause and people telling me I'm something special. And maybe I am, in my way. But tonight, standing up here in this beautiful hall, looking out at all your faces, I'm thinking about someone who wrote to me, a guy named Tony from Pittsburgh. The intimacy of his tone transforms this temple of music into something resembling a living room conversation, 2,000 strangers suddenly feeling like confidants. Frank reaches into his jacket pocket and withdraws the worn letter, unfolding it with reverent care. Tony works in a steel plant. Or worked anyway, until they laid him off. He wrote me this letter, and I want to tell you what he said. His voice catches slightly as he reads selected passages aloud, sharing Tony's struggles with unemployment, his fears about providing for his family, his simple gratitude for music that helps him believe in tomorrow. The audience listens with the rapt attention usually reserved for sacred ceremonies, understanding instinctively that they're witnessing something far removed from typical entertainment. Tony reminded me of something I almost forgot, Frank says, carefully refolding the letter. We're all in this together. The guy who builds the cars, the woman who teaches the kids, the man who sings the songs. We all get knocked down, and we all have to find a way to get back up. The words land with the weight of hard-won wisdom, spoken by a man who has experienced both the heights of success and the depths of personal struggle. He returns to the microphone, but his posture has changed completely. Gone is the theatrical stance of the consummate showman, replaced by the simple dignity of a man sharing truth. This next song isn't for the critics in the front row or the society folks with their fancy programs. It's for Tony and for everyone like Tony, who knows what it means to keep fighting when the odds are against you. The opening notes of That's Life emerge from the orchestra, but Frank's delivery transforms the familiar tune into something entirely new. Each line becomes a conversation with Tony, with every struggling worker in every factory and mill across America. That's life. That's what all the people say, he sings. But the usual swagger is gone, replaced by empathy and understanding. His voice cracks on certain phrases, not from age or fatigue, but from the weight of genuine emotion. As the song builds to its climax, something magical happens in the venue. The barrier between performer and audience dissolves completely. These aren't spectators watching entertainment, they're human beings sharing a moment of profound connection. When Frank reaches the final notes, "I'm gonna roll myself up in a big ball and die," then pivots to the triumphant conclusion about picking himself up and getting back in the race. The entire hall erupts not just in applause, but in something approaching catharsis. The standing ovation continues for nearly 10 minutes, but Frank barely acknowledges it. He stands quietly, humbled by his own vulnerability, transformed by the act of stepping away from legend and into simple humanity. As Tony makes his way to the stage, 2,000 people rise to their feet. When Frank embraces the steelworker who saved his soul with a simple letter. The moment provides the catalyst for the most honest performance Frank Sinatra ever delivered. But those who witness this moment will carry it with them forever. The night they saw not just a great entertainer, but a great human being choosing connection over performance, empathy over ego, truth over artifice. In that choice, Old Blue Eyes achieved something greater than any hit record or sold-out show. He reminded everyone present that beneath all our individual struggles and separate dreams, we share the same fragile, beautiful, resilient human heart.